Hi, my name is Timur Civan. I'm a director of photography, and today I want to walk you through the Cinemartin Eclipse 7-inch high-bright 4K monitor. So this is just to go through some of the basic functions. As you can see, the click wheel activates the main menus, and you have your guides. And you have the option, as you can see, of custom sizes, 80%, 90%. Those are title and frame safe. For standard broadcast use. You have different aspect ratios that you can cycle through. 2:1 is actually kind of cool because that's the Netflix standard. Just throwing that out there. 2:3:5:1, and you can still see above and below. It does give you like a little bit of a look through. And the custom gives you percentages so you can create your own custom shapes. So for example, if you needed to create something that was along the lines of 9:16 instead of 16:9 for vertical video for some social media stuff, you could build that as a custom size. Okay, so from there we'll go, and obviously you have your crosshair, which is the center crosshair, on and off. You have variable grids, quarter quadrants, thirds, 16ths, etc. And it actually gives you quite a bit of options. And this is really good because this lets you line up things for vertical straightness, horizons, architecture, things like that. Being able to use this is pretty cool for lining up good frames. So in your next one, you have your video configuration. And this is your basic, like you would get knobs on a standard CRT. You have your brightness, contrast, the chroma, which is the saturation, and sharpness is one that I think is actually kind of cool because usually I turn the sharpness completely off, but if you wanted to use this as a focus monitor, you can crank the sharpness way up, and it acts like peaking, but a less intense version of peaking. Instead of you getting a bright red, peaking function like it has, it's more of a neutral looking image, so you can still get a sense of what's in and out of focus, but you really can see on the monitor itself as you rack. There it goes, right there, sharp. So it's more subtle, and some ACs prefer that, which actually makes it viable because it gives you the option to do. And the image looks neutral at 0. It doesn't actually do any softening. But it's such a high resolution monitor because it's 1920 by 1080, or actually 1920 by 1200. It's good to keep the sharpness up a little bit, actually, in my experience, because I keep it around 10 or 20, because the image, the resolution of the monitor is so high and the monitor is so small that the pixels are tiny, and being able to see what's actually completely in focus becomes a little bit more difficult. A little bit of sharpness just gives you a little bit of a sense of what's actually tack sharp and isn't. Obviously, you have your tint, basic color temperature, and this is your backlight adjustment. And this is where the high bright really kicks in. So as you come down, you'll see practically shuts off. So if you're shooting on actually it does shut off. If you're shooting on a very dark set and you just want to keep it, 10% power or 20% power, it gives you the option to come all the way down, which is actually pretty good because sometimes when you're shooting on a nearly pitch black set, whether it's low light or concert kind of a situation, having a really bright monitor, it closes up your irises in your eyes, and then when you look away from the monitor, you're practically blind. So having the ability to have a really customizable brightness is very nice. So we'll take that back up to its brightest point, and it really kicks up high when you go to 100. Basic aspect ratio, and it'll do all kinds of squeezes and squishes and all the different things. So it does have a 2:1, which probably means that if you were to input anamorphic, 2:3:5:1, if you were to put in an anamorphic signal, it would de-squeeze it for you here. In the system is all the basic guts of the monitor. Your on-screen language, how long it stays up, the transparency of all your menus, and you can save them as multiple users for different setups for different cameras. Obviously, system reset, you can flip the image on the monitor, a low battery alarm if your battery drops. I'm going to turn that off so it doesn't make noise. Yeah, so as you can see, the flip control, you can turn it on and then you can change the on-screen display, which means that even if you flip it over, you can still keep the menu systems correctly oriented. So if for whatever reason you need to mount it somewhat permanently upside down, it gives you the option. For whatever reason, if the cables are obstructing something, you can flip the monitor, set it to be upside down, and then choose to keep the on-screen display correctly orientated to the operator. Little things like that are actually pretty important. So now for the functions, and this is on the top, you'll see there's 4 function buttons up here. You can assign each one, and I have it set up, the 4 that I use most often, which is peaking, zoom, image zoom, because I'm looking at a 1080 image right now, so 1-to-1, pixel-to-pixel wouldn't function. False color and histogram. So just to give you an example, we'll turn on the peaking, and you can see it lights up red. But what's actually kind of cool is if you pay attention, the background doesn't get activated particularly. And I've noticed with some peaking functions in some monitors, if you have a deep depth of field, like our lens is sitting at a T8 right now, it kind of picks everything up. But with this, as you roll focus out, you can really see it separates the foreground from the background nicely. And you can really tell when you're sharp as you roll between the different parts of the image. So that's kind of cool. I like that. So now this is the pixel-to-pixel zoom, and when your pixel-to-pixel is on, I'm sorry, not pixel-to-pixel, zooming function, where it pushes in on the image and blows it up, you can choose to then activate peaking as well. So you can still have that same high-quality peaking function, but zoomed in. And this is great for ACs because they can really get a sense of what's sharp and what isn't. So we turn the peaking off and come back out to standard. Far as I can tell with what I've used, the zooming function, you can't move it around. I think it just pushes in on the center, and that's kind of what you're stuck with. Because I've rolled, yeah, as you can see, this changes the volume on the monitor with the wheel, and there's no other real input functions, so I think you're kind of stuck with middle. So here's our false color for exposure, and it has the exposure range along the bottom. It's a little bit muddied. Let me turn off the on-screen display on the camera. Okay, so now I've taken away all of the displays, and you can see a fully clean image. So here in the false color, you'll see it starts, the dark blue is 0, purple is -1, which gives you really shows you what's underexposed. I can't even get it to go down that low by covering the lens, but you know, as you come up brighter and brighter, it seems that the LUT on the camera won't allow it to go over 100. So I can't get it to go fully red. But if your camera has if the look in your camera goes beyond 100 IRE, it will show up bright red to let you know what's over and underexposed. Most of the time the scale goes from darker to brighter, but in this one case it's reversed. So just be aware. It took me a second to get used to it. And then finally you have a simple histogram, just to give you a quick and dirty version of exposure. Now within each of these functions, you can assign each of the buttons to whatever you want. So let's keep going through and see what's in there. So now you have the zooming, which we've already seen. You can view audio meters. In this case, I don't believe that they show up here, left and right, for the 2 channels. You have the pixel-to-pixel, which doesn't do anything in 1080 footage. You have to input 4K in order to see it, and I will demonstrate that later when we hook up the A7R. So you have the check field function, which basically goes through the RGB and then a monochromatic version. And this would be a great thing to use. You put on the blue only field and you feed the monitor the SMPTE bars, your standard checker bars, the color checker, and you can then calibrate your 709 look correctly here. The horizontal vertical delay, and what this did was it kind of splits the image. The bottom becomes the top becomes the bottom, and I think the whole point is so that you could see this edge and see what's happening. So as you click through it, it then jumps to the other end. So this is now the split in the middle of the image. And then you flip it again, and it will turn off. I think it's more of a legacy function from older cameras. The guides, as we've seen, so you can turn the guides that you choose on and off. The center crosshair, the grids, which we saw earlier, so that you can line up straight horizons. The peaking, which we've already seen, and we're back to false colors. So those are the basic functions that the monitor provides. And again, as I mentioned, it is missing a waveform, which I think would be really nice to have. But most cameras have enough exposure tools that it's not 100% necessary anymore. It's just something that I'm personally used to. And plus, the false color is actually a more accurate way of judging exposure because you can see exactly where it falls, wherever it is on the, oops, you can actually see where each of the exposures fall directly in the frame. Okay, so this is the back of the Cinemartin Eclipse. As you can see, there's a menu click wheel with rotation and click function. This exits out of the menus. You have your input, which changes between SDI or HDMI, and your 4 function buttons, and the power switch is here. Your 2 plates, and these are the hot swappable plates. This one is set up for Canon LPE6, but they are very easily removable and standard, I think. So you can always put in the plates you like. And they just kind of click in. Okay, so here you go on the bottom. You have your SDI in and out, your headphone jack, 1/8" headphone jack, the XLR power input connected to the cable, which is connected to the battery back there, full-size HDMI in and HDMI out, as well as an update port with USB. Obviously, there's a connection point here, and there's 2 connection points on the side, as well as one on the top. Now, one little funny quirk is because it's a 4K monitor and it's actually doing quite a bit of processing, there's a little note here that says, "Do not touch hot surface." And I gotta tell you, it is pretty warm. I think I'm viewing 1080 right now, so it's not as warm as it could get, but we will put 4K on in a second, and then I will go back through some of the menus. Okay, so now I have the Eclipse set up with HDMI in, coming from an A7R2 in 4K, just so you could see what happens when you have your 4K mode on. And something interesting I noticed is when you go into your menus and go to your function setup where you can set up your user assignable buttons, you're given more options. So for example, we found this mode called 5D2 record, and as I don't have a 5D Mark II, I can't say for sure, but what it probably does is, I remember when the 5D Mark II, you would hit record, you would get sort of like a pillar boxed 4:3 with a 16:9 patch in the middle. Most likely, it zooms in a little bit on the picture to full frame the image. So I can't test it, but it's a theory, and you do get a few other options too. You still get pixel to pixel, check field, HV delay, guides, all of that stuff. But there's a couple of other things. DSLR scaling, for example. It can do different forms of punching in to correct for some of the older legacy DSLR image quirks. Some of them would output funny frame sizes. So this gives you the ability to correct for a lot of the older stuff if you have an older camera. I think that's pretty cool because it's kind of included. So here's one thing that I wanted to talk about was the difference between zoom and pixel to pixel. So let's change this to zoom, right? Come back out. So we're going to go pixel to pixel. And as you can see, off of a 4K image, it is absolutely tack sharp. So you get your focus, and you can punch back out. Now, simultaneously, now that that's off, zooming, for all intents and purposes, does the exact same thing. I think it's just a question of what is feeding the camera. Whether you're feeding 1080 signal to it or a 4K signal to it. It seems like zoom gives you the ability to push in on 1080 material, whereas zoom and pixel to pixel is effectively the same thing in 4K mode. So that's just something to be aware of. You can't really go wrong. Oh, actually, there is a slight difference. There's a little bit of a stretching effect happening when you go to zooming when looking at 4K material. Whereas you'll see, pay attention to the roundness of the lens. When you switch to pixel, now all of a sudden you could see the top of the eyebrow and the lens is correctly round. So pixel to pixel is what to use in 4K mode. It looks normal. Zooming mode looks normal in 1080 material, but it causes an artifact in 4K. So when you're using 4K, just use pixel to pixel. Okay, so that was basically just to show you the difference between the SDI input and the HDMI input. You get a few more options in HDMI mode. You get some of the DSLR scaling options. You get some specialty stuff for the 5D Mark II in case you still have one of those and you're using that. The image is absolutely sharp, tack sharp, as it is a 1080 monitor, and considering how small it is, it's really, really astonishingly sharp, actually. It's kind of hard to tell in the video until you see it in real life, but it looks fantastic. And yeah, so that's just an interesting thing to know, that as you switch between the inputs, you get some different tools. And I think that's pretty cool. And I like that you're not burdened with it in SDI mode. It just removes it completely, so you don't even have to bother with it. Only when you come over to the HDMI side of the monitor do you get access to those menus. And that's the only place where they're really applicable. So it's kind of cool that separation between the two, and you don't have to stumble around switching through unnecessary menus when you're trying to set buttons. Thank you for watching, and keep an eye out for the Cinemartin Eclipse.